Hello, world. I have here with me today a marketing leader with 15 years plus experience in digital marketing, and she specializes in content creation, lead generation, team building, brand marketing, creative partnerships, recruitment, product marketing, and sales enablement. Please welcome Cristy Garcia to the show. Cristy, are you ready to get radically transparent with me?
I am pumped. Let's do it.
That's the answer I love to hear. I always like to start off the show with what I think is a little bit of an easy, radically transparent question. But I'd love if you could give us a brief look at your professional journey and how perhaps you found yourself as VP of Global Marketing at Impact.
Sure. It's a pretty short story. For a long time, I wanted to be an advertising copywriter, creative director at an ad agency. So I studied creative writing and advertising in school. I got a master's degree in advertising. And then I started to realize that that wasn't what I wanted. I joined the world of the client-side marketing team at a tech company, and it was B2B. So it was almost like a complete 180 from what I thought I was going to be doing. But what I've found, and I think this is probably true across the board, is that the education and passion that I have for creative has actually resulted in a lot of pipeline for my company. And I feel like that creativity in B2B really stands out. That's not to say that B2B marketers aren't creative, but I do think that B2C sort of like leads the charge there, and then B2B catches up. So if you can keep that creative mindset and move past the concern of like, oh, this may not be trackable, or it may seem weird, it's not corporate enough, you can do some pretty amazing and fun things. So I'm proud to be a B2B marketer. I'm proud that that's what I've been my entire career. And I feel like I've learned a lot of great things along the way. But as far as how I ended up at impact.com, a colleague of mine who was a sales rep actually at a previous company had joined this company and said, "We need you." And so
That's the best way to join a company.
I know. I was like, great. And I think he got a referral bonus. So, it wasn't completely like good natured of him. But regardless, I did join. And within a couple of years, I worked my way up to VP, which I had been in other companies. But I was really happy to join even at a director level because I believed in the vision. And I saw the potential that the company had. And I'm really proud to have been here for almost 4 years and sort of leading them to the next journey, which is IPO.
So. That's fantastic. Speaking of your company, which sounds incredible, impact.com, in one quick sentence, elevator pitch, what's the value impact.com brings to your customers?
We provide a method of customer acquisition that doesn't involve advertising ourselves. It's called partnerships. And a lot of people think of partnerships maybe as like a reseller agreement, but when I'm talking about partnerships, I mean influencers, coupon cashback, loyalty, B2B partnerships. And by that, I mean brand-to-brand partnerships, commerce content, working with major publishers. And the reason why it's really important right now is because the modern consumer just doesn't want to see ads, and they don't believe brand messaging. And so what they're doing is they're spending a lot of time researching online before they buy a product or service. They're saying like, what do other people say about it? What are the reviews? Like, let me read a top 10 article that's written by Forbes, see what people are thinking about. They go to G2. And so it's really important for marketers and brands to be in those places where consumers are seeking. We provide that. We have a marketplace where you can find and discover and recruit partners. We have a contracting technology where you can send your terms and conditions and do it right there. There's a payout, payment capacity, and there's optimization and reporting and everything you could possibly need to manage partners at scale. So that's a little bit longer than a sentence, but that is
Listen, longer than a sentence, but much needed. And I couldn't agree more with what you said regarding the fact, right? We've gotten pretty smart, not only as marketers, but as consumers. When we see an ad, we know that we're being tracked in some way, and we try to do everything we can to be untrackable, not to see that ad. So I couldn't agree more with you. So just kind of thinking out loud here about what you shared and what you do and your journey of how you got there. I can't imagine there's any shortage of things keeping, or I should say letting you sleep maybe, but keeping you up at night professionally. And I was hoping that we could get a little radically transparent about what are some of the things keeping you up as a marketing leader these days professionally.
I would say now more than ever, it's really about hiring top talent and retaining your team. We all know that there's a little bit of a crisis going on. And so the people who, at least the people who work for me, I want them to feel valued. I want them to understand that you do good work. You don't necessarily just get more work. Like there is a value for you in that. And maybe that's moving up in your career, or maybe that's a performance bonus. But we definitely do our best to make sure our top employees, and all employees, but especially our top employees, are happy. Asking for 360 feedback. Yeah. Hiring is a different story. It's tough. It's tough. There's a lot of companies that we compete with on a regular basis when we're looking for top talent. So I would say those two things are probably the biggest things. Not the only things. I would say tuning out the noise and focusing on the big stuff. I think a lot of us can get caught up in some of the drama or some of the politics or some of the, things that we don't like. And then being able to step back and saying, like, is this important? Is this going to matter? Is this something that I can respond positively to? Can I set a good example? And so I think about that a lot. Like, did I spend the day? Would I be proud of myself if I looked back on every single conversation I had today? And if not, then how can I change that going forward? So I do spend a lot of time analyzing that.
That is, yeah, that would keep me up at night too. I feel how you're doing today.
Is that anxiety? Is that also called anxiety? Because it sounds like it.
Okay. This was the year of mental health, so we're good.
Yeah.
But, I want to take it back to something you shared in terms of recruitment and retaining top talent. And, radically transparent with you, we have this, similar challenges, and we know a lot of marketing leaders are facing that exact crisis that you're speaking of. Could you share with us some of the, I don't know if we want to call them perks or ways that you retain your talent that maybe other leaders, it could spark some ideas in no way to compete with, but maybe some cool perks or one you particularly like?
Sure. So, I mean, I could talk about the stock options. I could talk about the unlimited vacation. But I'll tell you, the one thing that always means a lot is being able to try new things and grow in your career and be appreciated. I don't know who said this, but someone who's appreciated will always do more than expected of them. I find that to be true 100% of the time. And so what I try to do is create an environment for them to fail and to be different and to try new things. And it's safe. And that brings out the best creativity, the best work, the best team camaraderie, is creating an environment where people can make mistakes, but they are being rewarded for trying something new. And so I have only found for myself that I can't work in environments that are different than that. So I'm fortunate that culture does exist at impact.com. But it's my job as a manager and as a leader to provide that environment for my team. And we get to do all sorts of fun stuff. We recently just won an award for a campaign called Advertising is Dead. And we created a microsite at advertisingisover.com. And it's like a whodunit, like who killed advertising. And we've been able to have so much fun with that and create this huge campaign that's driving, millions of dollars in pipeline and in bookings for my company. But it's really about fostering that type of environment where people are still able to do new things in their career. And if they stay here, great. If not, then the next job, they have all this experience to take with them. And that's being a good human also, but it's being a good boss, is setting your team up for success.
I love that. And congratulations on the award. It sounds like a great campaign. I'll have to go check it out. Now, my next question is still team related, right? But we're going to incorporate one of our favorite teams into this question, none other than infamous sales teams, right? But when it comes to what you do, what for you is the most challenging part, and for your team, when it comes to aligning the marketing and sales department, and where do you feel the struggle is real?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily call it a struggle. I have great relationships with the sales leaders in the company. And in fact, the person who invited me to this company was a salesperson from a previous role. So I've never really experienced that sales and marketing sort of, fighting that other companies have. So I'm grateful for that. But I would say one of the things that need to be prioritized with regard to sales and marketing is the feedback loop.
Okay.
And so I think we can look at Salesforce dashboards and Domo reports, and we can say, oh, this campaign is doing really well, or our lead gen programs are really great and profitable. But unless you're getting the full story from the sort of the anecdotal, not anecdotal, unless you're getting like the full story from the team, if they're not seeing the value in your marketing efforts, if they don't agree with the positioning, if the content that you're creating isn't generating anything for them, that's information you need to know, because marketing is just as reliant on sales as sales is on marketing. And one of the things I've always said is, like, I don't care how great your campaign is, or how much time is spent creating the latest ebook. If your sales team isn't using them or it's not helpful, that's a major misalignment. And so you really need to listen to your sales team and understand what they need to close deals, to get their foot in the door, and joining prospect calls, listening to recordings if that's available at your company, is really a good way to learn how they are using your messaging and what you can improve. It's really important to understand how it's being received. And that's not something marketing can really see without sales. It's like, yeah, they clicked on it or they engaged with it for a couple of minutes, but at the end of the day, you sort of need that other piece. And it's gold, right? So talking to the sales team and listening in on calls can completely change the way that you go to market.
Agreed. Question regarding the communication loop, especially in today's climate where many of us are working hybrid, maybe some of us are back to office, but not everybody. What are some of the ways in which you take it beyond just looking at the clicks or the web page visits coming through to see the success of an ebook? How do you communicate with sales? What questions are you asking them, or how are you getting the best insight from the sales team regarding, the assets that they're using or not using or need more of?
Yeah, so we actually have a Slack channel.
Everything on Slack.
Yeah, and then we also set up monthly meetings with the sales leaders, and this is like an honest conversation. We say, this is what we have going on. Here's some of the campaigns. How are your prospects responding to them? Is it helpful? Also, before we launch any campaign, we're talking to sales. We're saying, hey, we want to make sure that the BDR team is ready and able to follow up with these leads. Hey, can you pick the top prospects you want us to be targeting? I mean, they're involved in every step of the way. And so, of course, they should be involved at the end, which is the results and trying to understand, what worked and what didn't. So as long as you keep that open line of communication, I don't think you can have that many problems between sales and marketing. I mean, you're working together.
Right.
Yeah, you're working together.
Right. Exactly. It's working together. Ultimately, sales marketing, we're working for the same goal, impact revenue. We've got to do it together, and you can't have one without the other. And I love hearing that. And especially the fact that you haven't had to necessarily worry about that friction, that if you Google sales and marketing, literally the first like 5 hits you get are kind of that riff or the struggle. So it's really nice and refreshing to actually hear that you have a sales team and a marketing team that are quite aligned.
What I've found more challenging than the sales and marketing rift that doesn't exist in my experience, but what has is trying to explain marketing to executives. I think that is always a marketer's challenge, trying to provide proof that what you're doing is valuable, and that there's a return on it, and trying to understand and explain, marketing is not the same as sales. We're very different. Our performance needs to be looked at very differently. Even though pipeline and bookings are what all marketers, especially B2B marketers, should be striving towards, there are other things, right? I mean, we do PR, we do content, we do webinars, we run events. Like there's all sorts of different ways to measure performance within marketing that don't necessarily exist just in the sales numbers. And when you're hiring marketers, it's not the same as sales, where, okay, you have 20 salespeople, that means you're going to generate X, right? Because you can put a dollar amount per marketing doesn't work that way, much to everyone's demise. I get it. I totally get it. But there are certain skill sets that are really valuable for a marketing team that may not be directly contributing to the bottom line. So I think it's important that people are armed with data when they're having those conversations about increasing budgets or, finding new people to join the team, expanding the team, scaling globally, speaking the language, but also holding your ground, and trying to help them understand how marketing works.
Agreed. And I'm just thinking out loud here. We were having a conversation internally earlier today with how how to have the conversation with your executive team that marketing is more than just the guys that color in, or like we do more than coloring, but a topic for a different day. But I really have to shout out, I liked how you addressed and reframed and sent a new message that the issue isn't actually between sales and marketing, but there is a conversation that needs to be had between marketing and the executive team. So I like the new message that you just sent out there. I want to shift for a moment, because when I was doing my due diligence, knowing that you were coming onto the show, I did a little Google search, and I had come across listen, you've got a lot of great things out there, but I had come across a really interesting Forbes article that you wrote, called Forget ROAS, right? And
Return on ad spend.
Yeah. And the 3 other commandments for commerce content success. And I read through it, right? And I was just really interested to kind of see and get a feel for who you are professionally. And a lot of the things you wrote in that piece, I started to really incorporate as I thought through our own content strategy as a B2B organization, because you call it a few things, but I have to say my favorite that you call out is the newsletter. And I love that you're radically transparent about nixing it. And I know, right, there's like a little bit of, okay, don't just nix it. And you put a lot of thought into this, but could you take us into the headspace that led you to get to that conclusion of nix the newsletter?
Yeah, so the article was about how you can be working more closely with some of these major publishers that are influencing your audience, whether or not you want them to be. And so that's the whole beauty of the partnership space, is that we get to work with like Meredith, Condé Nast, Forbes, all of these great publishers, and we get to talk to brands who work with them, right? So we recently had a panel where we had the head of content and commerce at Meredith Corp sitting down with one of their partners from a company called Caraway Home. And we were talking through how that commerce content relationship got started. And one of the principles is that you need to ensure that when you're forming this partnership, you're not spamming your publishers with your news. Frankly, you need to be a little bit more creative than that. And that's where the newsletter piece came in, was to say, this isn't an area where publishers are going to sit down and read your newsletter. Like, if you have a product, send them the product, invite them into the manufacturing place and let them see how the product is produced. Bring in some, other people and start to demonstrate how it's used. Those are the things that really move the needle in trying to form partnerships. Publishers have more demand than supply. Like, there are endless companies that want to have their name in the news, and not just from a PR perspective, but from a commerce perspective, because that is what is happening. They're using affiliate links, shoppable links, to say these are the top 10, gifts for a new mom, right? And so if you want to be on that list, you're really going to have to speak that language and appeal to them in a different way than you would appeal to maybe other partners that you're working with. So that's one piece of advice, and the other is that you need to make sure that it's relevant. There's a lot of that mismatch going on where it's like, oh, I want to reach your audience, so I'm going to send you this product that I think is a fit. Publishers have the right to say, look, we have this editorial integrity. If it doesn't match what we think we would want to promote, or it's not something that we think our audience is going to like, we're not going to promote it no matter how much you pay us. And I have so much respect for that, because that's what the partnership represents, is like this beautiful match when it works, right? Like, I have a product that this audience is trying, or this publisher reaches, it's a trusted audience and I want to get in front of them, and this is how I can do it. And so you need to be a little bit, crafty, smart, clever, stand out, creative, again, to sort of get your name out there and to make that connection.
I love this conversation because it pulls you full circle back into how you started in your career in B2B marketing, coming from the B2C space. And it just proves how important it is that, as a B2B marketer, you still need to have that creative side, and you can't cast it, to the side. And having that B2C background or, experience and the creativity side, it's critical. Like you just can't ignore it anymore. So with that, with all of your years of experience, and I know you mentioned, and I love this earlier, that one of the things keeping you up at night and what drives your team to success is making an environment for them where it's okay to make mistakes and it's okay to try new things. Um, it has me thinking in terms of your role as a marketing leader, kind of to the next level. How do you provide during these times mentorship to your team, or where do you find your team appreciates it the most?
That's a really good question. And I am sure, like you and many others that are listening, I've had to hire people fully remote and they maybe still haven't met anyone.
Yeah.
And so in those cases, it is difficult, right? Because you can't just take them out to lunch or grab a coffee or, send them like a note on their desk or something. So in the ways that I feel that I provide mentorship and that I've gotten feedback that I provide mentorship, it's in acting in the way that I want them to act and setting an example. And I think taking the time to really understand, like, you have to be empathetic as a leader. You just have to. If someone's having a bad day, you need to notice that. Like, that is your job. And maybe that's too much pressure for some people who have 30 people reporting into them. But if, I don't think maybe the conversation around mental health has gotten better and more frequent in a lot of places, but in the workplace I still feel like there's a little bit of a stigma, and so saying, what, we're taking a mental health day, everyone sign off. Like, the company shut down. Yeah, the company shut down for this day and you can't sign on, and if you send emails, we're going to come after you, basically. But being able to create an environment where they feel comfortable in talking about that is a really big deal. I am very honest, and I say I suffer from my own insecurities and imposter syndrome.
Don't we
I think
all?
everyone faces it. And I read another article that said, marketers are the most wanting to please than other people in organization. Like, that's our job, right? To get people to like the stuff that we're saying, like the stuff, like engage with it. And that translates to us. We want people to like us too. And so I don't know if that's why, but I do feel like confidence is something that I've found across the board in every team or marketer that I've met that people struggle with. I don't know why that is, but I think what I try to share is that nobody has it all together. Nobody knows all the answers. Some people are better at, sort of hiding their insecurities than other people, but confidence is such an important part of your success in any organization. If you don't know what you're doing and that comes across, like, people aren't going to trust you. And so it's important to be realistic, of course, not pretend that you're something that you're not, but make mistakes now, make them now, and then you won't make them later. And don't be afraid to tell people that you're having an off day or that you're suffering from some issue, and ensure as a leader that you're paying attention to that stuff. If someone flags something and says, I'm unhappy about this, I think it takes a lot of courage. At least that's how I look at it. And so I have a lot of respect for people that are able to talk to me and say, I didn't like this, or I'm struggling with this decision, or, I'm having some personal problems. That just makes me more empathetic, and I feel like maybe if all leaders acted in that way, we could be a little bit more honest about the fact that, we're struggling in some areas.
I really appreciate that response. And, part of the reason why I was so excited to have you on the Radically Transparent podcast is because of your radical transparency. But I think you bring up a really valid point. And for anyone listening in, reporting into a marketing leader, for any marketing leader listening in, creating that dynamic of trust, and authentic, ability to openly communicate with one another, whether it's good, bad, or ugly. It's such an important part. Oh, it's almost, I don't even know, you can call it like a soft skill, right? Being empathetic and kind of more of the EQ side of things, but it is so important.
I also, I mean, I feel like setting an example too. It's having that relationship, but I realized, like, when I was telling one of the top performers on my team, I think they're all top performers, but she was struggling. And I said, you shouldn't be working on the weekends and you shouldn't be up at 2 o'clock in the morning working. And I looked at myself and I said, oh my God, I have created this environment where my team feels like they have to work the way that I do. And my work-life balance, I struggle with that. I've always struggled with it. I don't want that for people. I definitely don't want people looking at me and saying, okay, well, Cristy's a VP and this is what she does, so that means that's what I have to do. It's not. And so I had to take days off. And I was,
Leading by
wanting to,
example.
itching.
Yeah.
I was itching to send an email and to check my Slack, but I was like, no, I can't do that. And the same is true on the flip side. When you're working, like, are you working? Like, are you doing it with them? Are you helping them? Are you part of it? Are you a player coach? Like, set an example by the work that you do, and the way that you work. And it's something I learned the hard way that, maybe I need to take some time off. So maybe not for me, but for my team.
No, I love that you're open about it, because even, as myself listening in, right, you do have sometimes these fears. What do I bring to my manager? What do I share? What don't I share? And I think you bring up such a valid point that you need to share, because that's the only way, especially in this new way that we work, that isn't even new anymore. It's like 2 years old, but this new way that we work, it's really the only way to strong communication. And essentially, as marketers, that's all, we're supposed to be really good at that. So with that, it brings me to my last question of the show, a little less heavy. And, I'd love to bring it back to dive deeper into kind of that leadership, mentorship question. But for now, to close out the show, I'm going to ask my favorite question. What's one thing that you can tell us about yourself that we cannot find on your LinkedIn?
Well, I guess there's two things.
Okay, let's hear 'em.
If that's okay.
It's more than okay.
One, I am the biggest 90s hip hop fan that there is. That I listen to 90s hip hop when I'm walking, running. I don't even call it 90s hip hop. To me, that's just hip hop. But it's not to most people. And so that just gets me so pumped up. It's just one of those things, I guess you never really escape your high school, music set that you listen to. But regardless, the second thing is I actually became a better manager after I had children.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I think I always had that, like, oh God, they're going to think I'm a mom and that means I'm not going to get promoted, or that, I'm going to have to choose between career and childcare and stuff. And those things, may exist in some places. But what I found is that being a mom, I became a lot more tolerant, and protective, like tolerant in the way that I can listen to things and not have to react to them, and sort of try to understand where they're coming from, in the way that you try to listen to your kids. And I have a 4.5-year-old and an 18-month, and they are completely different, but I take time and I'm trying to understand where they're coming from. I think that improved after I had children in my work life. The other is being very, very protective. I try to say no, and be the bad guy sometimes, so that it doesn't end up on my team's plate to do the work. And I also am sort of like their biggest cheerleader, behind the scenes. I think I probably was before I was a mom, but now there's just something about having a team that makes me very maternal about it.
I get it. Listen, I have a toddler. I get it. I get the fears. I get it.
Yeah,
But I like hearing you say that, right? Because you wouldn't necessarily see that in a profile, a LinkedIn profile. So thank you. Thank you, Cristy. It's been quite the episode. I have to say, I'm like sweating because you were so transparent with us, and I really appreciate that. So thank you so much for joining us. If anybody listening in wants to continue the conversation, learn more about impact.com, where's the best place to reach you?
I would say probably my LinkedIn, or it's Cristy Garcia, or go to impact.com, and you can find all sorts of forms to fill out to get demos and learn more about partnerships.
Head over to Cristy.
Yeah.
Sounds fantastic. Cristy, thank you so much.
Thanks for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. This was fun.
Thanks for tuning in to the Radically Transparent podcast, brought to you by Oktopost, the only social media management and employee advocacy platform architected for B2B. I'm Jennifer Gutman, your host and director of social strategy here at Oktopost. And if you love today's show, we'd love if you subscribe, rate, and give a raving review wherever you get your podcasts. For more discussion on B2B social media marketing, be sure to follow Oktopost on LinkedIn. And of course, to gain access to all our free social media marketing and employee advocacy resources, head on over to our website, www.oktopost.com. Until next time.